everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, and today we are going to make something that's so fun, so bright, so colorful. That's just my fabric choices for the day. Today we're going to make the Julie roll top bag, and this comes to us from Miss Freckles Designs. Alright, so look at this little cutie patootie. I kind of showed it off a little bit in my latest live stream on YouTube, and I have gotten so many messages from people saying, please just tell me what it is. I want to make it so bad. So this is the Julie roll top bag. It does look like a lunch bag, doesn't it? I mean, you could just hold it like this and it's like a little lunch tote. I think the intention of it is for it to be like a craft bag for knitting, crocheting, things like that. But you use it however you want. This bag comes together so fast. It is so simple. I do modify it a little bit. You guys, if you've been here for a minute, you know I do not like interfacing things. It just takes a lot of time, and I am not a patient person. So I'm using material today that does not require any interfacing. Waterproof canvas, nylon, water-resistant canvas. I'm going to use webbing for the top. I'm also modifying it a little bit to have like a swivel hook and a D-ring, purely because I just didn't have the hardware that was in the pattern, and I didn't want to wait. Again, not a patient person, so I just wanted to make the bag. So I'm going to show you the tweaks I do to accommodate these different hardware pieces. So let me just show you this bag. So like I said, I modified it just a little bit so I can have a swivel hook here. There is an adjustable slider on the back here, so if you have a bunch of stuff and you need this to be bigger, you can adjust this to make this strap longer to accommodate more stuff. Okay, so once we open it up, you can see it has a nice long top and then a little base down here, which is so cute. This bag is the medium size. The pattern has 3 sizes, small, medium, large. This is the medium size, which I think is a really perfect size. When we open it up, woo, deep pockets. It's got deep pockets. So what you could do is you could fold this down, which is so cute. So you see, you can roll it down, fold it down like that, which is adorable. And then we've got some pockets in here, just like a threesome pocket over here. A single pocket over here, little pockets on the sides as well, which are really cool. I love this bag, guys. I really do. It's just such a good sojo booster, you know, where you haven't sewn for a while, you really want to sew something, but you just don't want to spend a lot of time, but you want to be really happy with the outcome. I think this bag, I mean, this is a great one to add to your stash for those days. So in today's tutorial, I'm going to be using pretty much the same stuff. We're going to use this Luxe Light Nylon from Wonderground Fabrics for the base. We're going to use a waterproof canvas for the top and a water-resistant canvas for the lining. We're going to use the hardware as well, the swivel hook, the D-ring, and the slider on the back. It comes together so quickly. I can't wait for you guys to make this one. So thank you as always to Miss Freckles Designs for allowing me to use your patterns in my tutorials. We love them so much over here. We love them so much over here. They're so chic, so classic, and you can tweak them. You can keep them very neutral and very, again, traditional, and they look amazing. Or you can go a little wild. I mean, it's all about the material you use. The design itself is perfect for everything. So you can use any material you want. I think a really cool option here would be to use like a wax canvas for the base. I think that would look really cool with like a canvas for the top. Maybe a waterproof canvas. You want to go more of a neutral, you know, feel. I think that would be really beautiful. But I do love this nylon. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shoutouts, anything at all, leave it down in the comments section. I will have timestamps as always. This is a quick one, but if you're just interested in like, hey, how do I get this like buckle thing that you did? I'll have timestamps for it down below, so you can just hover along the bottom of this video and you can see all the little chapters, or you can expand the description. I think it's over here. You can expand the description, and down there will list all the timestamps, as well as links for everything I'm using. So if you're interested in this material, or this material, or this material, I'll have links for as many items as I can down below. Alright guys, let's get started. So like I said, I'm going to use that waterproof canvas, that Luxe Light Nylon, and the water-resistant canvas today. It is such a fun combo. You don't have to interface anything. It all goes together quickly. All the material is pretty easy to use. The Luxe Light Nylon does fray quite a bit, so you have to be very gentle when you're working with it, or else it can kind of drive you crazy. I'll give you some tips and tricks to use that though. So today I'm going to be making the large version. So for that, I'm going to need ½ yard of my exterior fabric, about a fat quarter, I'd suggest ½ yard or so, of your base fabric, the contrasting fabric on the bottom, and then a yard of interior fabric. I'll be using this exterior fabric for the pockets on the inside of the bag as well. So if you wanted to do that like I am, I would suggest a yard, just get a yard of each. Especially if it's material you love, you'll use it in more projects. Here are the little extras today. I'm gonna be using a swivel hook and a D-ring instead of the little circle turn opening thingy. I actually did find some in my sewing room, but I really like this combo, so I'm gonna stick with that today. So I have a 1-inch swivel hook, a 1-inch D-ring, and a 1-inch slider, and then I have some 1-inch webbing. The size of your webbing depends on the size of the bag you're making. So since I'm making the large, I need 23 inches of this, and then I have my bag tag as always. So here are all the little bits and bobs I'll be using today. I'll be using a Tex 45 weight thread in the top that just goes through the needle. This is a weight I really like to use. In the bobbin, I'll be using a Gutermann thread from Joann's. Just a note, you will see some of the top stitching, the bobbin stitching in the end result. So if you want, make sure you pick a thread color that goes well with the material you're using on the exterior. My needle of choice is a Microtex 8012. I always have these 3 marking tools on hand. This is a heat erasing marker, this is an air erasing marker, and this is a silver inked vinyl leather marker. You never know which one you're gonna need, so I just like to have them all. A seam ripper as always because I'm not perfect. My Bianni stiletto, which is like a 3rd hand at the sewing machine. It allows me to get really close to the needle without actually getting my fingers close to it. A lighter is a must-have in the sewing room. It's gonna clean up any little loose threads and make your bag look really professional. 1-inch by 6-inch ruler as always, and then a healthy supply of clips. I will also be using 1 rivet to install the strap in the end. You don't have to do this, you can sew, but it is very challenging if you're sewing. So if you don't use rivets, then maybe use a Chicago screw here. But for the rivet, for this particular one, I find it easiest to use this hole punch here. And then I like the hand, it's a tabletop, but I just use my hands for this, to set the rivet, and then 1 medium-sized rivet from Emmeline Bags. All right, so let's go through the pattern pieces. The measurements for these rectangles are in the pattern. However, this pattern is written with centimeters. So the inch conversion doesn't go hand in hand with your inch ruler normally. They'll have partial fractions that you're gonna kind of have to estimate. So if you don't really want to have to do that, or you don't have the metric ruler for this, I do suggest printing out the pattern pieces and just using those. What I actually like to do, because the pattern pieces are for each size. So you see, like, this is the exterior body panel and inner pocket panel. So I have this dash line here for the small, and I have this next dash line for the medium, and then I have this final edge for the large. If I was making the medium, like I did before, what I do is I actually punch a little hole out right here at this corner. And when I lay this on my material, I just mark where this top line is here, where this hole is here, where the side is over here, and then this top corner. So I'm just marking the 4 corners of the rectangle on my material, and then I move this to the side, and I use a long ruler to draw the lines between all 4 corners. And then I use my rotary cutter to do it that way. It's a little bit easier rather than, having to like actually trace this all out. Just my tip to you. But I'm using the large today, so I use the whole pattern piece. I have 4 cuts of this first template. 2 of them are for the exterior of the bag, and 2 of them are going to be for the pockets on the inside of the bag. Like I said, no interfacing today. And then we have the base of the bag. I am using that Luxe Light Nylon. Now let me just give you a little bit of advice, because this stuff is so fun to play with. We all love it. However, it does fray something wicked. It loves to fray. Now you can take a lighter and you can burn down the edges. It's a plastic material, so you can just light it all on fire, and that helps. But the more you use it, the more fraying it's going to do. So in my opinion, it's just be very gentle with it. Also, it's a little slinky. Can you see this? You see how it does that? It's a little slinky. If you want to add woven interfacing to this to keep it in place, you can do that. However, I don't mind the slinkiness. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it kind of looks a little wobbly wonky, but for this pattern, it doesn't need to be super precise. It'll work. So I have 1 cut of this for the base of my bag. And finally, I have 2 cuts of water-resistant canvas. Water-resistant canvas is just a little bit lighter than waterproof canvas. It's very easy to work with. My suggestion with this material, especially if you get this very light waterproof canvas, iron the material first and then cut out the pattern pieces. This does have a tendency to shrink when it irons. So I would suggest iron it all first and then cut the pattern pieces out to make sure it's the size you need it to be. But whatever you're using for the lining, you're gonna need 2 cuts of this larger panel. The pattern also has these little printables here. You do need to print these off. This is going to be for helping you decide where to stitch the pockets in the interior of the bag. It is actually very useful because the bag does end up having a square base and goes square all the way to the top. You have side pockets, and if you don't stitch exactly where it tells you, your side pockets are going to be kind of weird. So use this for sure. And then whichever size of these you're using, this is going to be to help you box your bottom. So since I'm using the large, I'm going to grab this one, but the other two, the medium and the small, I don't need those. So for me, I just need these two pieces to help me. So let's grab our interior main panels and box these bottoms. I'm going to take my little gusset template and I'm going to put it on the bottom right corner. So if you have a directional print, we're working on the bottom here. So just place that on the bottom, on the right corner. And then I'm just going to trace this. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom left corner. Once I have those traced, I'm going to grab my scissors and I'm just going to cut right along that line. We're just boxing the bottoms. So I'm just cutting out this little square, this little rectangle. All right, now it says we need to measure 2 centimeters up from this top corner here. So not the very bottom of the bag, but this corner right here. Measure 2 centimeters up and then draw a line going across. You're gonna do this on the right side of your material. I do have this measuring tape here that does have centimeters on it, but when I try to measure out 2 centimeters, it's gonna be right between 6 and 7/8. So right between 6/8 and 7/8, that's where 2 centimeters are. So I do suggest you have some sort of a centimeter marking tool at some point. This is what I do. I'm just gonna take this and I'm gonna line it up on this corner over here at the 2 centimeter mark. And then I'm gonna mark a line where 2 centimeters is there. Do the same thing on the other side. And then I'll just grab a large straight edge to connect these two dots and draw a line going across the right side of this panel. There we go. Now I have my 2 centimeter mark on the right side of this panel. I'm going to repeat all of those steps with the other interior panel. Boxing the bottoms, cutting out the box bottoms, and then drawing my 2 centimeter line. All right, both of our main interior panels are prepped. We can set them to the side. Now you're going to grab your 2 interior pocket panels and you're going to fold them right sides together, long sides together. I like to use clips just to keep it together. So do this for both of your pocket pieces. And now let's go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along each of these long clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, once you have these sewn, I'm just going to finger press the seam allowance on the bottom open. It's just going to make it easier when we turn it over. So I just go like this. I'm not going to iron this bit because I don't want the iron to get on the back of waterproof canvas. Sometimes that can kind of add gunk to your iron. Now I'm going to reach in and just pull it right side out. And do this for both of them. Now once you have it flipped right side out, you want to press, I like to just kind of roll with my fingers first, where the seam is on the bottom. And I do this in sections, so you can see I'm over here on the bottom right, flattening that out. And then I'm going to press this section with my iron. What I do is I press it with the iron. Waterproof canvas likes to get very loose when it's hot. And so I give it a moment to cool just a bit so I can touch it. And then I go over it with my fingers like this to really crisp down those seams. And that gets it nice and flat. So I'm just going to reach in and get the bottom seam of the center section good to go. And then I'm going to press the center section and then press down with my fingers. You can also put a ruler on top of this and let it cool with that on, and it'll cool very flat. Finally, I will do the left section over here. You don't have to get it hot for very long. All right, so I'm going to repeat that with my other pocket panel. Okay, once these pocket panels are pressed, now we're going to take the top edge, and the top edge is going to be the single folded edge. So the seam is down here on the bottom, just that single fold is on top. And we're going to top stitch along the 2 top folded edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once these are prepped, grab your lining panels. Let's just start with one, the other 2 to the side. Take your lining panel and lay it right side up. You should still be able to see that line marked on the bottom. And you're going to take your pocket, and the top stitching part goes to the top, and that seam is going to line up right on top of that line that's 2 centimeters high. All right, once you have it lined up, I like to just clip the sides, but if you're worried about it moving around, you could also add some tape to the top or the bottom just to hold it in place. But I find clipping the sides is good enough. So once you have one clip, let's go ahead and repeat that with the other one because they're pretty similar for the most part. So I'm just going to once again lay this down, lining it up with the mark on the bottom and clipping the sides. Okay, now I'm going to take both of these to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along the short edge and the bottom edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now we're going to make our little individual pockets. This is where this template comes in handy. You can see that there's different dashed lines depending on which size you're making. That's going to really determine like the size of the box bottom. You want to pay attention to this. Don't skip this. You know, a lot of times I'm like, let's change the pockets. We're not going to change them on this one. It has to be the way it says. So since I'm doing the large, I don't have to fold on any of these lines. I'm just going to line it up over here on the right side with the right side of my material. And I'm going to take my air erasing marker and I'm just going to draw a line right on the edge of my template. There we go. So I have one line over here and I'm going to do the same thing on the left side, just lining it up with the left side of my material and then tracing the line. And then for this one, I'm also going to do a midpoint line. So what I do for that is I just fold the whole thing in half, matching up the edges, and then I can pinch on the bottom and mark a line. And then I can pinch on the top and mark a line. And then I can grab a straight edge and I can just connect these two marks to create my third line. All right, so this pocket is ready to go. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, except I'm not going to draw the center line. So we'll walk through the sides again. Just lining up our template on the edge of our material. And I didn't realize this till it was finished, but what this does is this creates these little skinny pockets on the side of the bag, because remember the bag has that like cubic shape, right? It's boxy. So these are really cool little things. I want to try it out at the end. I think that if you did use this as a lunch bag, you could put like your utensils in these pockets. I'm going to try it out. Don't let me forget. Don't let me forget at the end of this video to do it. Okay, so one lining panel, we have 2 lines marked. The other lining panel, we have 3 lines marked. We're gonna top stitch over these lines. What I like to do is start at the bottom, and then I just go up one side of the line, turn on the top, and then go down the other side of the line. That way there's 2 rows of stitches for each line. All right, once we have the pockets attached and all good to go, let's take our 2 lining panels and lay them right sides together. Easier if I do it like this. Making sure you match up the bottom corners, these little box bottoms. There we go. So now let's clip along the sides and the bottom just to hold it all together. All right, once you have it all clipped, we need to leave a turning hole on the bottom here. So I'm gonna leave one that is 4 inches wide. If you're using lightweight material, it doesn't really need to be that big. It's going to turn easily. But if you're using really thick material like vinyl or something for the exterior, you might want it to be a little bit bigger so that you can shove it all through without ripping anything. All right, now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna sew along the sides and the bottom at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, but you're not gonna sew in this little opening right here. Make sure you backstitch at these marks. Also, you're not sewing inside these corners. You're just gonna sew down the side, backstitch right here, and sew the little bits on the bottom. Okay, now you can press open these edges if you'd like. I just kind of give them a finger press. I'm not that particular about pressing seams, honestly. It just makes it easier when you're sewing to have the seams pressed open. But I can do that at the seams while we do it. Okay, so now we're gonna box these bottoms. So you're gonna pull the 2 lining panels away, and we're looking at the bottom here. And you're gonna pull along this little opening so that the bottom seam and the side seams meet one another. And honestly, you can press both of these seams open. So you see how I pressed that open on the bottom and pressed it open on the top, Or you could keep the seams unopen and just press one to one side and the other to the other side. It's up to you. Whatever is easier using the material that you're using. So I'm going to clip right where they meet. And then I like to pull further down. So if you're just pulling here and you're like, it's not straightening out, try pulling down here. And that will help straighten out this edge up here. So I'm just gonna clip along this edge. I like to add clips to the raw edge, and then I also add some clips down here on the sides so that it doesn't fight me. Now I'm gonna repeat this with the other side. I'm gonna clip this right sides together as well. All right, now along these two box corners, we're gonna sew them at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end on each one of these. Okay, your lining is now done. It's nice and boxed on the bottom. It should look just like this. You still have your opening down here. And if you want to peek inside, there we go. It's a nice tall bag. It's gonna be a big one. So we can set this to the side now. Now grab that template we're using to box the bottoms, and you're gonna fold right along the folding line. So don't cut there, because if you want to make more of these, you're going to need it to still be that other size. Just fold right along the folding line, just like that. So now grab your base panel, and you're going to fold it right sides together. And just use some clips to help hold this in place for now. We're not sewing along this top edge or anything. We just don't want it to move around on us, especially if you're using this kind of slinky material like I am. Now I'm going to also gently finger press along the sides and add some clips along the sides as well. Just to get this to stay as still as possible, since it's a little bit of a wiggly worm. So now I'm going to take my little box bottom template here that it's already folded on the folding line, and I'm going to line it up with the bottom fold and the right bottom edge over here, holding it in place. And then I'll grab a marking tool and I'm gonna trace this on this corner. Remember, this is on the bottom folded edge. Okay, and then I'm gonna add some more clips. I like to add clips outside of the mark and also inside of the mark. It's gonna make it easier when I cut it. Okay, I'm gonna repeat that on the bottom left corner over here. Now we're going to cut out these bottom corners. So you just cut right along the line. Now let's open this back up and unfold it, and there we go. This is what it looks like. Now we're gonna mark the center on the two long edges. Now grab your webbing. Okay, if you're using the same little O-ring clasp that's in the pattern, the size of this is gonna be perfect. If you're doing it my way with the swivel hook and the D-ring, that hardware takes up a lot of space, so we end up using a lot less webbing. So I'm going to tell you how I do. I still have a 23-inch cut here, but we're not gonna use all of it. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to cut a 2-inch cut off of this. So the pattern suggests a 3-inch cut. That's if you're gonna use the webbing as your loop, but I'm using the D-ring as the loop and the webbing to hold it in place. So I'm just gonna cut a 2-inch section off the end of my longer piece of webbing. With webbing, I always like to melt the ends with a lighter because it does fray a lot. So now I'm gonna take my D-ring and I'm gonna wrap the webbing around the D-ring just like that, and clip in place. And I'm actually just going to sew right along this bottom edge here at about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to hold it together. And now I'm going to take my bottom panel, and on one of the center marks, I'm going to line up this little tab with the D-ring and center it on that mark and clip it in place. Now I'm going to sew this down at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You might want to switch to a zipper foot so you can get a little bit closer to this D-ring. Okay, so this side's good. I'm going to turn this around and we're going to add the rest of the webbing. Once again, melt down these frayed edges and just take one edge of your longer strip of webbing and center it on the other mark, on the other long edge, and clip in place. And just sew it down at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so let's return to the side with the D-ring, and let's grab one of your top exterior pieces. And if you have a direction, think about that. I like to lay them both going like in the same direction. And then I'm gonna fold this top piece down right sides together with the base, sandwiching that D-ring in between, and then just add some clips to hold these together along the raw edge. Make sure if you're using hardware, the D-ring is folded down. It's not turned up. You don't wanna sew over that. Okay, now we're gonna sew along this edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Again, if you're using the hardware and you shorten that strap, you might wanna use a zipper foot here because it is pretty close to the seam and you don't wanna hit it. and then make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have it sewn, let's flip this up and then flip the seam so the seam goes behind the base panel. There we go. Now, if you want to use an iron here, depending on your material, you can do that to flatten this out. I'm just going to finger press this. And now we're going to top stitch along the base material side at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I forgot to turn the camera on to show you that top stitching. I'm sorry, I will show you on the other side though. But I have it top stitched here on the base. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So let's flip this. So we're looking at the opposite side of the base panel. Grab your remaining top panel, check for direction here, everything's in the same direction, and then flip it down, right sides together, and then add some clips along these long edges. Okay, now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to, you can look at the back side of the base because we're going to flip this open and we want the seam to go behind the base, but then this strap goes up towards the top material over here. Once again, give it a good press, either with your fingers or an iron to get it as flat as possible. And now let's top stitch along the base panel at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, before I forget, I want to make sure I add my bag tag. And the front of the bag is going to be where the loop is, regardless if you have the hardware or not. Where this little loop is here, that's like the front. This is what you're going to see the most of. So I'm going to add my bag tag right underneath this. So I'm just going to set this in place and I'm going to top stitch around all 4 edges of my tag at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, this is looking so good. So make sure the strap and everything is tucked inside and fold your exterior right sides together. And let's clip along the long sides, just like we did with the lining. This time though, you don't have to clip along the bottom because it's already together. But do make sure you clip around the boxed bottom over here. All right, on the bottom over here, I added the clip so I could get a nice fold on this bottom corner here. And then I'm just gonna mark where that fold is because I'm gonna need this midpoint mark when I box the bottom over here. So this is just a good time to do it. Just mark the midpoint on that folded bottom. And now let's sew along the 2 long sides at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Alright, if it makes it easier, go ahead and press open the seams on the sides. And now we're going to box the bottom just like we did the lining. So we're just going to pull it apart in the center and then match up that side seam with your bottom mark here. So I marked that midpoint down here. And if you want to open the seam, you can. I'm going to find it easier. With this material, I find it easier just to push the seam to one side. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to clip along this raw edge. And then I'm also going to clip a little bit further down on the fold because that does help keep it together as I remove the clips and sew. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now we're going to sew along these 2 clipped edges, just the raw bits, at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, now your exterior is all ready to go. So let's grab the lining and turn the lining right side out. Isn't that pretty? I love that color combination. Like this would be a pretty exterior too. Okay, so now we're just going to insert the interior into the exterior. If you have a preference on where the pockets go, then think about that now. The pattern says that this interior side that has the 3 pockets, so that center line, they put it against the panel of the exterior that has the long webbing. Totally up to you though. But we're going to insert this in there so that the exterior and the lining are right sides together. Okay, now let's clip along this top edge. So you can spread open these seams if that's easier for you. Really just depends on your material, but you can spread open the seams on the exterior and the lining. Just make sure you match up the side seams and then add a clip to it. I like to start with the 2 side seams first and then I clip the rest of the bag together. All right, now we're going to sew along this top clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. All right, I'm gonna be completely honest with you. Somehow when I made the first bag, I completely skipped this next section. I don't know how, but I just completely skipped it. So You can just turn this whole bag right side out and then top stitch along the top and then just move on and be done if you'd like. I'm going to try this. I don't like trying something for the first time when I'm filming, but we're gonna do it. So pay attention, and if you're like, that looks like a mess, then skip this next section. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull the exterior and the lining out from one another. All right, so I've got my boxed bottom over here, my boxed bottom over here. So it looks like I'm supposed to take the boxed stitch line on the exterior and the lining and pull them together. So not like this or anything, but like pinch this in like that. And then pull these together. Okay. Line them up. And then add some clips to clip them together. And this is supposed to have a tidy finish. It's supposed to provide a tidy finish. So it makes it so that the lining can't like flail around in there. So I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. So I'm really just gonna take this center piece here and shove it in so that I can pull down this exterior bit. I know this is, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna sew it one at a time. That's gonna be easier. So first, I'm gonna take this clipped edge that I already have under control, and I'm gonna sew these two boxed seams together at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so that's sewn together. So now I'm going to pinch in the side to bring this exterior boxed bottom together with the, where is it? The lining boxed bottom. This is a little tricky. It's a little tricky. You're gonna have a bit of a mess here. That's okay. Okay, and then line them up at their centers first and clip together. All right, just do your best to keep this area that you're gonna be sewing as flat as possible. Don't let it start rolling over on itself. And all right, just flatten it out. Okay, and now we're gonna go sew along the other side here, just going right over the stitches at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, which is going to attach the exterior and the lining together. I hope I'm doing this right. All right, so I did that. Now what? Okay, now it says to turn the bag right side out through this opening here, gently. You don't want to rip it. I probably should have left a bigger opening than 4 inches, especially since I did this step here. I will tell you, it's very easy to turn out if you don't do that step. I'm finding it a little tricky to turn out right now. All right, so when you turn this, you're gonna have it lining side out. So the exterior is still on the inside of the bag, and right now we're looking at the lining. So the hole in the bottom should already have the raw edges tucked behind it. So what you should be able to do is just pull on the corners. And you just wanna make sure that this opening here is folded material, no raw edges poking out. And then add some clips to hold it in place. And then I'm going to take one of these little sew-in tags because they're fun. And I'm just gonna add it in that seam. So when I top stitch this, I'm also gonna stitch down the tag. So now let's top stitch right along this little clipped opening at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alrighty, so now let's flip this bag so that it's right side out. And yeah, that's really cool because now you don't have to worry about the lining kind of coming out and slipping around. It's just nice and attached in there, which is going to be helpful on the last step when we're stitching down the sides. So before we get there though, what we want to do is roll out this top seam here between the exterior and the lining. And I just like to roll it and clip it. Depending on your material, you might want to kind of roll this out and then iron it because we want this to get nice and clean. Because you see over here how it's like it puckers in on itself. It's a mess. We want a nice, flat, straight top here. Alrighty, once you have it pressed or clipped, just prepared, now we're going to top stitch along this top edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so now that that's top stitched, we're gonna give this bag its structure, which is really cool. And it's not as hard as it looks, okay? So what you wanna do is start with the box bottom over here, go to the side seam and measure from that seam all the way over to this corner. So let's see, for me, 3 inches. Let me just make sure it's the same on the other side. Yeah, 3 inches. So it's 3 inches for me from this midpoint to these corners. So on the top here, I'm gonna measure from this middle seam, and I'm gonna measure over 3 inches on the left and the right, and I'm gonna make a mark. I also like to do it where the base and the exterior meet, if possible. It's a little tricky, you gotta kind of pinch it with your fingers. But I'm just marking a little tiny mark here with an air erasable or water erasable, some sort of fabric friendly marking tool. There we go. This doesn't have to be perfect, so if you're worried about that, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's gonna turn out perfect. So now what we're gonna do, I'm gonna start on this edge right here. I'm gonna pinch right at this corner, and since we sewed the lining and the exterior together, this makes it so much easier, honestly. So I'm gonna pinch right at that corner, and then I'm gonna pinch right at my mark here. And when I pinch, I wanna make sure I'm catching the lining as well as the exterior, not just the exterior. So it can be a little thick there. If you have to kind of roll things around a little bit to make sure that the exterior really hugs that lining, go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to go to the top over here, and I'm going to pinch right at that top edge and add a clip. And then you see what I can do? I can kind of just tug it, straighten it out. But I go underneath, and I'm kind of putting my finger underneath it to make sure that the lining is caught too. So just take your time here. You're just making a fold on the side here, just like that. So you might want to open it up and check inside, make sure you caught the lining as well. All right, so I'm just going to start with this side. But what I want to do now is I want to top stitch at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way from the top to the bottom of this clipped edge. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end. So you see when you do that, it creates this beautiful structure. And when we do all 4 of them, it has that like paper bag look. Isn't that cool? All right, so I'm just gonna repeat that for the other 3 corners. I will show you the process, but I'm probably not gonna walk you through it in detail. My tips again are just make sure when you're doing these clips, you are catching the lining as well as the exterior. If you're using thicker material, especially on this base, it's okay if you increase your seam allowance a little bit. Instead of an 1/8 of an inch, maybe use closer to a 1/4 of an inch, because it can get bulky, and it's better that you catch the lining than not catching the lining. All right, I've got the other 3 edges all clipped, so now I'm just gonna top stitch along all 3 of them at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once again, if you feel like that's just not enough to catch all the material, you can increase it by a little bit up to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I think would be fine. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end on each one of these. Okay, so you see how it gives this bag that great paper bag structure. Isn't that cool? I love it. So before we move on, I like to just grab a lighter real quick and just run it over the top and bottom of all my top stitching, because after you clip it, they're gonna have little threads, little pigtails. Okay, now this is where it gets a little tricky, okay? Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take, let's see, I'm gonna lay it so that it's the front with the D-ring side up, and I have my strap poking through the top over here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my slider, and I'm gonna lay my slider wrong side up. So this strap is gonna go through the top on the left side, and then up, and then underneath the middle bar, and then up the right side. And then I'm going to take my swivel hook, and I'm gonna lay my swivel hook swivel side down. So I'm looking at the underside of the strap, right? And then what you have to do, this gets a little tricky, you can move the bag out of the way now. You're gonna make a little loop over that middle bar, and you're going to keep your strap straight. You're going to slide your strap back sides together, so over the back of that swivel, underneath that middle bar, make sure the raw edge goes up in that loop, and then just flip it down so that it goes over the other side of the middle bar, just like this. There you go. So you see now, looking at, again, the underside of this, we have this raw edge, we have the back of the slider, and we have the swivel. So leave it like that for now, because we're gonna probably have to make it a lot shorter. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab my bag, and I'm just gonna stand it upright. I'm gonna fold in the edges. So I'm just gonna roll this top down. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna try to lay it down so you can see it. So you can see what's gonna happen is this strap is gonna go over, and it's gonna clip in place. Now, this is very long right now. So what I wanna do is see how much I wanna shorten this. Because if it's too long, it's not gonna hold the fold. See how we roll it down? It's not gonna hold it if it's too long. So I like it nice and tight. So I'm gonna keep rolling down the top. And I'm just gonna see how tight I have to get this. So eventually what will happen is, as you move your slider, it'll go all the way to the back here, which is fine. But even then, it's still too loose. So what you do then is you start pulling that raw edge to really tighten it. So you see how my raw edge is just like all willy-nilly, and that's fine. This is why I don't cut it yet, because I'm waiting to see how short I need to make that strap. So I like to put the slider all the way down to the very base right here, and then pull the tail. And this will be how tight the bag is at its tightest. So whenever we're using the bag and we move the strap slider up, it'll be looser. So this is, again, this is the tightest it will be. That's what I'm trying to figure out right now. I think I'm pretty happy with that. That looks pretty good. Nice and tight, holds the roll really nice. So now I know this is where I need it to be. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to unclip this, open it up, look over here. And now I'm gonna take the tail and then the other part of that tail that's through the strap slider, and I'm gonna pull them together just like that, okay? And I'm gonna add a clip so I don't let that move around. Okay, trying to make sure you can see this really well. So now what I'm doing is pretty much just measuring out about 1.5 inches, and I'm going to mark on the tail at 1.5 inches. There we go. And that is where I'm going to cut. So I have my little 1.5 inches mark here, and I'm gonna cut the tail off. So now I have a little tiny bit of webbing. It's not much, but it's something I can use for another project. And now I'm gonna use rivets to set this because I find that's much easier than sewing. So first, I'm going to melt this raw edge with a lighter. And then I'm gonna fold it back on itself so that raw edge tucks in between the little nub of a tail here and the other side of our webbing. So can you see? We have it folded over here. In the end, it'll be nice and tucked in. You'll never even see it. Now add a clip. Alrighty. So I'm going to carefully make sure everything is staying together. I'm gonna grab my hole punch and I'm gonna punch a hole right in the center of that fold over, and I'm only punching through the folded over edge and then the associated webbing behind it, the other webbing over here. I wish I had names for all this. Like, this is Frank, this is Jimmy, that's Charlie. Charlie is not gonna get punched. Good for you, Charlie. But Charlie's not getting punched, but these two guys over here, they are. I already forgot their names. But we're gonna punch a hole through there. There we go. And then we're going to get a rivet and insert the rivet through that punched hole, snap it in place, and then again, I love this tool for small areas. It's just easier than the big press, and it works exactly the same. So I'm just going to press this in place. There we go. So you see, when we extend this slider, the strap does get longer, so it can still be adjustable. Like I said, when we're testing out the sizing for this, we're trying to see what it needs to be at its shortest. And let me just tell you, remember we started with a 23-inch long piece of webbing, and then we cut 2 inches off of it over here. So before we cut it down, our webbing was 21 inches long, and I ended up cutting off about 9 inches. So there you go. So this piece of webbing over here is 12 inches long. So if you want to pre-cut this based on my measurements for the large, I ended up using 14 inches of webbing. There you go. So now, this is easier to set if it's standing up, but I want you guys to be able to see it better. I'll show you in the front camera too. But I've got everything folded, my seams are folded, and I'm gonna roll it down. Roll, roll, roll. And then I'm gonna bring my little hook over, clip it on. How stinking cute is this little bag? Isn't that adorable? We gotta figure out how to put a strap on it, huh? Alrighty, let's take a little looky-loo. Front camera, front camera. That's so fun, isn't it? Okay, let's take a look. These are like my little babies. I just love them so much right now. Okay, let's take a look at this one versus the medium. So here's the large, here's the medium. It's not a huge difference in size, but it is larger. It is larger. You do notice it. I wish I would have made the small. I always do this. I'm like, no, I don't need to make all of them. I'll just make 2 of them. And then I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna need the small too. I wanna see what the small looks like. These are awesome, guys. These are so awesome. And I think, how would you put a strap on this? Where would you put the strap? I feel like it would be so cool because so many people, when I showed this originally during the live, they were like, that's a lunch bag. That looks like a little paper lunch sack, which it does now. I didn't see it to begin with, but now I do. How would you put a strap on it? It needs a strap. Maybe like right here. Maybe we could like add a strap right here on the fold part so you can hold it. Give me your ideas, guys. Let me know. Let me know. And if you decide to make this anyway and you post it on social media, please tag me. I want to see it. But especially if you decide to put a strap on it, you let me know. You tag me. I want to see that. I want to see it. Okay, so can you see over here, we have like little pockets on the side. See those little pockets? Let's put some utensils. Yeah, look at that. Utensils go in there. Here's a Tupperware. I would assume you'd want a lid on it if you put it in your lunchbox. Let's stick that in there. Oh yeah, that works. That works nice. If you were gonna add like glass products in here, then you probably would want to have some sort of foam. So I feel like making it a proper lunch bag would require a good amount of modification to make it safe, also to make it insulating, things like that. It looks like a lunch bag and it's really cute. Maybe it's best as like a snack bag. So it's what I would use. I think it'd be a great snack bag. So I hope you love sewing along with this today. I hope that this inspires you to go and just make a whole bunch of these. These are so stinking cute. This would be especially good for really any birthday, holiday, anything like that. It's a great like little gift bag to put all your treasures in. I can tell you right off the bat, when I made the first one, my kids were already fighting over who gets to keep it. So it is a kid-friendly, fun pattern. So I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.